Many of us are undertaking a simple project to finish our basement. At least we thought it was going to be simple. So let's draw up a basement for today's lesson on lagging calculations. So we'll just kind of lay in our drawing here. Got our furnace and hot water heater, washer, and our dryer and our laundry area. So in our basement we're going to create a playroom for the kids. So they will have their own area. We're going to create a bathroom so they are able to stay downstairs in a moment's notice. Create our utility room, and in our utility we'll have some workbenches to be able to do some work, and of course I want a home theater for me, so I'm going to have my own little space as well. So here's what our basement's going to look like. Now we've selected for this, we're going to put a lighting calculation is what we're going to learn in this lesson. So we're going to look at a light here in the center of this kids area and add some track lighting over here on this wall and some more track lighting over here on this wall. But for today what we're going to do is just look at the lighting in the kids area and do some calculations there. So the size of this room is 11 by 15, and that gives us 11 times 15, that gives us 165 square feet. So the fixture that we selected for this is going to be a 55 watt T6 bulb, and it gives us 3,300 lumens. Now we looked at our charts, and what we need for this is we need an average of around 15 foot candles for a room that we're going to be using for a living room, family room, that type of an area. So we'll have that for our kids area. So we're going to use 3 different methods as we calculate here today and look at some lighting calculations. So the first one we're going to do is just very simple. And here we're going to divide the lumens by the square foot. So we'll have our 3,300 lumens
divided by
our 165, and that gives us an answer of 20 foot candles. Okay, so we look back at our 15 as the average, between 10 and 20 is what we're after for this type of a room, so that one's going to work just fine. Now our next method that we want to use is called the point method. And for this method what we're going to do is we're going to look at the ceiling height from the fixture down to the floor. So that's our D value, and we have this as 8 foot. So that's our ceiling there. So for this method we need to look at the specs that give us our candela distribution, and that value at 0, which is what we're looking for according to our formula, is 2,330. So we're going to take that factor
divided by
the ceiling height squared, so 8 squared, and that value comes out to be 36.4 foot candles. Okay, so a little higher than what we calculated in our first calculation. So next we're going to do another method, which is the zonal cavity method. So in the zonal cavity we have to do quite a bit more calculations, and for this one we're going to have kind of a chart that we need to follow. So the way this is laid out is, here's our fixture, and we have these different heights. So this is the height of the ceiling, this is the room height, and this final is the floor height. So if you had a workspace that you were working on, a counter or something that you needed to calculate for, you would use the HFC. We don't have those, we're just going to use the HRC is the one that we're going to be using. So again, we're going to need to look at some of the different factors that we need for this. So one of them that we need is our coefficient of utilization. Okay, we'll get that. Then we also need to figure out our light loss factor. So we'll get into a chart, look at that, and we need to figure out our room surface dirt depreciation over time as well. So we'll be looking to those as we figure this calculation. So a lot more builds into this one. So let's take a look at what we've got. So from our manufacturer spec and catalogs, we can get both of these values. We're going to look at the coefficient of utilization chart. Our room cavity has a ratio of 6, and we're going to use a 70% reflectance since our walls will be a light blue. So depending upon the wall color is going to determine your reflectance. So with those values, that gives us a coefficient of utilization of 0.82. This room, it's going to be a kid's room, it's going to be a clean room, so there's not going to be a lot of dirt that's going to be in this area, so the lamp light output is not going to depreciate very much over time. So here, we're going to look at our chart and look at a very clean room, and that's going to give us a 0.90 for that. So that's the factor we'll use for that. And then the last thing that we need is the square foot of the room, and we've already established that as 165 square feet. So I think now we're ready to fill in our formula. So we know that we have the initial lumens. That's where we need to start. So we have 3,300. We multiply that times our number of lamps, which is 1. Multiply that times the number of luminaries, which is 1. And multiply that times our coefficient of utilization, which is 0.82. And multiply that times our light loss factor, which is 0.9. Then we'll take all of that, we divide that by our 165, which is our square footage of the room, and that value then is 14.76 foot candles. So that's what we end up doing, more calculations and more detail. So we discussed earlier that we need 15 foot candles for our room, so this looks like, especially with all the detail we've added in, this is going to fit right in for us. So we've looked at 3 different calculations in figuring out the lighting we need for this one area in our basement remodel. So our first one, we came out with 20 foot candles, and again, that was a very simple calculation where we just measured the lumens, multiplied that times the square foot, gave us the 20 foot candles. The second method we used was the point method. That gave us an answer of 36.4 foot candles. And then the final one that we did with all the calculations and taking into account a lot of detailed information, that came up with a 14.76 foot candles. So that's going to allow us to see that this light that we've selected up here, this 55 watt T6 with 3,300 lumens, is going to work out just fine for this room. So as we finish out our basement, we're going to want to look at the lighting in each of these different areas, determine how the room's going to be used, and apply these same calculations to that to make sure that we have the appropriate lighting for each of these areas. So that's lighting calculations, looking at 3 different methods. So thanks for joining us.